Welcome back to Finnish Made Easier. This one's going to be part 2 of a video about verb conjugation. So if you haven't watched my first video about verb conjugation, I would recommend watching that one first. Also for this video, it's going to be important to understand consonant gradation, also known as kopete or softening. So if you don't know what that is, you're not familiar with that, I would also watch my video on consonant gradation or kopete before watching this video. But if you already understand that, you've seen part 1, then this will be great. So let's just get right into it. So last time when we were talking about verb conjugation, I laid out these 4 rules for us. And like I told you, these work for most words in Finnish. Almost every word in Finnish is going to fall under one of those 4 rules. But there are a few that don't. There's going to be some that fall into some smaller categories. So to bridge the gap of almost every verb in Finnish to every verb in Finnish, we're going to talk about a few extra little rules today. And then we'll talk about something called hardening. That has to do with consonant gradation. But let's talk about the new rules first. So the first one I'll do is this HDA. So in my last video, I talked about how there's words that end in DA, that they do a certain thing where we just drop the DA. But there's going to be one little exception to that, and that's if it ends in specifically HDA. So even though it ends in DA, if it ends in HDA, it's going to have its own rule. This could also, I understand, could fall under consonant A. But I'm just going to put it under DA because I think it makes a little bit more sense. But regardless of the fact that this is a consonant A and it ends in DA, it's going to have its own rule if you ever see HDA. You don't need to worry too much about this. As far as I can think about right now, there's only really 2 common words that use this, which is tehda and nahda. So pretty rare. But I'm going to talk about how you can use it, so when you come across those words, because they are used, then you'll know how to do it. So when it ends in HDA, what we're going to do is we're going to drop the whole HDA and add KE. So a common word that ends in HDA is tehda, which is to do. So if I wanted to put a case on tehda, the stem, well, to get the stem, I'm going to get rid of the HDA and add KE, which is going to give us something like teke. And because of consonant gradation, if I'm going to add something onto this, you might remember that K's, when they soften, go completely away. So if I wanted to add an N, for example, we're going to be left with something like 10, because we're going to get rid of the K. So it's kind of interesting how much this one changes. We start with tehda, and when we add an N onto it, we want to say like I do, we get something like 10, which is much different. So it's kind of an interesting one. And like I said, the only words that really use this, that are common at least, are nahda and tehda. But yeah, so that one's as simple as that. Just got its own little rule. So watch out for HDA if you think it ends in DA or is just a consonant A. And then the other 2 rules I want to talk about have to do with vowel TA. So I said in the other video that vowel TA, we just drop the T to get the stem. And that's true for most vowel TA words because most of them are ATA, OTA, or UTA. But there are still a few exceptions. And again, the words are kind of rare, but I want to still teach it to you so when you come across them that you'll be able to still make their stem. That is when we've got ITA and ETA. So when we have ITA, what we're going to do is just drop the A and add SE. So a common word that's ITA is tarvita. Tarvita means to need. So if you want to put a case on tarvita, we don't just get rid of the T even though it's a vowel TA, because it's specifically an ITA. So tarvita goes to tarvitse. Just get rid of the A and add SE. So if we wanted to maybe say I need, we could say minä tarvitsen. So yeah, get rid of the A, add SE. A nice little shortcut with this when it comes to softening is that since we're adding an SE and none of our softening pairs have an S in them, you never will need to worry about softening when we're dealing with this kind. It's always going to have an S in it, and none of these have S. So that's kind of nice. You can always just add a case right onto the end, any of them. But yep, tarvita, tarvitse. Rid of the A, add SE. And the last one is when it ends in ETA. These ones are really rare. They're a very specific type of verb. But what we do with these ones is if it ends in ETA, we're going to get rid of the TA and add NE. So this word kylmeta, which means like to get colder, like maybe if the air outside is getting colder, I might say that it kylmenee. So kylmeta goes to kylmene. We get rid of the TA and we add NE. Kylmeta, kylmene. And so those are actually all of the rules. Maybe a few verbs in Finnish, they're very, very few that might have kind of their own exception. But basically every single word will fall into one of these rules now that we've added these smaller, more rare ones. But there's still one more thing we're going to need when we're conjugating to make it apply to every single verb. And that's something I like to call hardening. It's kind of the opposite of the consonant gradation or the kopete that we did in the last video about it. This time, we're going to go the opposite way. So I put a chart here where I flipped the arrows from what they were in the other video. So now, if we have a single K, we're going to go to a double K. If we have a D, we're going to go to a T. Or an MM, we'll go to an MP. I like to call it hardening. So this is kind of why I like to call it softening and hardening. Because if we just say consonant gradation or kopete, it's not super clear which way we're going. But if we're softening, I like to say we're going this way. If we're hardening, I like to say we're going that way. So sometimes when we're forming a verb stem, we have to harden. And I put on here a star next to all the ones that we might need to harden. So vowel TA, sometimes we'll need to harden. Consonant A, sometimes we'll need to harden. And ETA, sometimes we'll need to harden. So these ones we never have to worry about hardening at all. But for these ones, we sometimes do. And so what that essentially means is just like softening, we're going to look at the first consonants that happen before the part of the word that we're really dealing with. And if they are now on this side of the pairs, we're going to move them to that side. So I'll show you an example of how this works. Kunnella is a consonant A, so we might have to look at hardening. So since we're dealing with this LLA, if it's part of this ending, that's never going to be the part that's going to harden. So we're going to look at the first consonants before the part that we're dealing with, which in this case is NN. Now, if we look at our chart over here, we see that NN would harden to NT. So if we want to find our verb stem, we're going to have to harden as well as doing this rule. So essentially, this LLA is going to go to LE because of this rule, and I'm going to harden. So our stem is going to be kuuntele. Kuuntele. So then if I want to say I listen, this is like to listen. If I want to say I listen, then I'd say minä kuuntelen, not minä kuunnellen. We have to make sure that we harden this because it's got this star here. And so obviously not all of them are going to be able to harden, like the word mennä is a consonant A, but obviously a single M doesn't harden to anything. Also, it's the first letter of the word, so we wouldn't mess with it. But if it has these consonants here that are going to harden, chances are we're going to have to harden it. So kuunnella, kuuntele. Another example is tavata. This is a pretty common word. This is to meet. So this one's vowel TA. Again, I put a little star here, so we might have to harden when I do this. And so if we look, this is the vowel TA. This is the part we're messing with. So we don't have to look at that. We're going to look at the first consonants before that, which is our V right here. V is also on this chart. V would harden to P. So when I do this rule, when I drop the T, I'm also going to harden this V to a P, which gives us tapa. So now we have tapa. So now if I wanted to add an N, you might kind of think, you look back at this, oh, well now I have to soften since I'm adding an N, and that would change back to a V. But an important rule with hardening is once you harden, you never soften again. I like to kind of think of it as like, maybe like liquid concrete. When we pour the concrete, it's soft, but once it hardens, it's never going to be soft again. If we ever have hardened while making the word, don't soften it. So once we've hardened, we don't even have to think about softening at all. We can just add whatever ending we want. So me tapam is just like we meet. But we have to make sure that we do have that V. We can't say tavam if we want to mean to meet. We have to say tapam. Another example, lämmeta. This is kind of the opposite of kylmeta. This is like to warm up. If like something like is in the process of warming up. If the air is warming up, we can use this word lämmeta. And so just like this, we're going to get rid of the TA and add NE, as well as we'll look at the first consonants before the part we're messing with, which is MM. And MM goes to MP. So when I do this rule, I'm also going to have to harden MM. So we get lämpene. So I could say ilma lämpene means like the air is warming up. So yeah, that's how that works. MM obviously will go to an MP, and we just still do the normal rule, lämpene. And now this next one I brought up because this is kind of a weird thing that can sometimes happen. You might notice that, you know, our R goes to RT, V goes to P, but on this chart, a blank space goes to K, because when we're softening, K goes to nothing. So sometimes when there's nothing, a random K will just appear when we're hardening. So sometimes it's kind of easier to tell, like for instance, this word paeta. Since these vowels don't really go together and make one sound, there's kind of a pause between them, paeta. It's kind of possible that a K will harden right there, but it's not always super obvious when the K is going to come. I would just kind of learn the words where a K does harden into the word. That's a little bit easier. But sometimes when we have these two vowels that make two distinct sounds right next to each other, sometimes a K will come in right there when we harden. So when we do paeta, which is like to escape, to run away, again, we're going to drop the TA and add NE, but we're going to harden this blank space to a K. And I know that's kind of a weird thing. I think it's hard to always know exactly when this happens, but just be aware that there are some words that do this. And so if you see this happening, it's just because a K is hardening from nothing. So paeta goes to pakene is the stem. So if I want to say like I escape, I run away, I could say pakenen. And it comes from paeta. So that's kind of a really interesting thing, so watch out for that for sure. But yeah, that's how hardening works. It takes a little bit of getting used to and adds kind of an extra deeper step. But again, also, just like these other things, hardening isn't super common. It's only with these few verb types, and a lot of the ones that fit into these verb types don't even do it. In fact, sometimes you'll have a word that even when it should, doesn't. And there's not really a great rule to know why. For example, tavata does harden, but if we just took off the T, avata, which is to open, doesn't harden. So sometimes there's just ones that do harden and some that don't. It's best to just, with hardening, kind of look at an example of the word that is conjugated and then just keep a mental note of that for the future. But most of them, if they can harden, they will. But that was kind of a lot, so I want to maybe erase a little bit and then we'll do a little bit of practice to make sure we're really understanding everything. All right, I've changed up the board a little bit. Now we've got some examples here. What we're going to do is we're going to change these from to do the verb to I do the verb, just like usual. And like usual also, if you think you already know how to do it, then you can pause it and try it on your own. And then I'm going to go through them and make sure kind of these things are making sense, and I'll show you kind of how to do each one. So let's just get right into it. The first one is we got nahda. And we can see that with nahda, we have this HDA at the end. So even though we could see that it kind of ends in a consonant A, kind of ends in a DA, this HDA is the most important one if it does fall into that. So we're going to follow this rule. So nahda, we're going to get rid of HDA and add KE, which gives us nake. And I said we want to say I see, not just, the stem of to see. So we're going to try to add an N onto the end of this. So we're going to have something like this. Whenever we're adding a consonant or a consonant-consonant vowel, we have to look for consonant gradation or softening. So I'm going to look at the first consonant before that one that I added, which is a K. We see that a K, if we were softening, the arrows would be the other way. A K goes to nothing. So we have to just get rid of the K. We can just get rid of that, which leaves us with naen. Sorry, I forgot those dots earlier. Those dots were supposed to be there the whole time. Naen. So this is I, C, naen. Let's go to the next one, valita. So yeah, this ends in a vowel TA, but it's specifically ITA. So just like with tarvita, valita, to choose, we're going to get rid of A and add SE. So get rid of that A, add SE, we get valitse. And then if we want to say I choose, we're going to add an N. The consonants before that are TS, which aren't anywhere on the chart, so we don't need to soften it all, so we just get valitsen, is I choose. The next one, tykätä. This one's a pretty common one. This is one of the words for to like. So if I like something, I can use this word tykätä. So this one is going to be just a normal vowel TA, not one of these two. So I just get rid of the T, but we have the star here. So let's check for maybe if we need to harden. Before the part that we're messing with, this vowel TA, we have a K here. And we see that K on the chart goes to a double K. So while I'm doing this rule, I'm also going to harden that K, which is going to leave us with a stem of tykä, with two Ks and two As at the end. Tykä. Then if I want to say I like, I'm going to add an N. And then it's very important to remember that since we hardened earlier, we do not soften again. So we're going to keep the two Ks here. So to like is tykätä, I like is tykkään. And then our last example here, vanheta. This one we see falls under the ETA. So we can get rid of the TA and add NE, which gives us vanhene. And I think I've already mentioned this means like to get old. If something is getting old or if someone is getting old, then they use this word, vanheta. So we have vanhene, and we have to look for hardening with this one too. This one also has a star. The consonants before the part we're working with is NH. And NH is not up here, so we don't have to do anything. We just have vanhene. And then we could just add the N right on. There, we can't soften it all, so we have vanhenen. It's just like I get old, I'm getting old, or I'm becoming old maybe. So that's how all of those work. Näen, valitsen, tykkään, and vanhenen. I hope that made sense. If you still have any questions about this, you can leave some questions in the comments and I'll try to get to those. I'll try to put a condensed version of these rules in the video description like usual, so look out for that. But I hope this made sense and I hope this will prepare you for speaking Finnish with any word that you come across. I would recommend doing a lot of practice, just looking up random words, maybe in Google Translate or in a dictionary, in their base form, and then trying to conjugate them on your own. And once you do that enough, it starts to make a lot more sense. So, yep, I hope that works, and we'll see you in the next video. Heippa!